After me, Ali directed me to Hassan, sitting or standing, follow my son. A victor by peace, he is the one. So my second Imam is Hassan. After Hassan, his brother Hussein, he went through much suffering and pain, and right before him dear ones were slain. The third Imam's children are in chains. I'm from the Shia, Ithna Sharia, that means I follow the 12 Imams. I'm from the Shia, Ithna Sharia, that means I follow the 12 Imams. My fourth Imam is also Ali. His du'as take our worries, and his ibadah of such degree that he was called Zainul Abidin. Muhammad Baqir came after him, a teacher of deen and dunya's ilm, sciences that we know today, based in foundations that he had laid. Imam as-Sadiq was next in turn. The doors were opened for all to learn. Malik Hanifa studying from me. Who is my master? I'm Jafari. I'm from the Shia, Ithna Sharia, that means I follow the 12 Imams. I'm from the Shia, Ithna Sharia, that means I follow the 12 Imams. As a Shia, I need to become in the footsteps of the 7th Imam. He was called Musa al-Qadim. With anger nobody had seen him. I love the Sultan of Khurasan, who is the 8th leader from the clan, Ali ibn Musa Rida, who was always content with Allah. The 9th Imam that we now call, goodness and bounty he gave to all. Taqi al-Jawad, the generous soul, at a young age returned to his Lord. I'm from the Shia, Ithna Sharia, that means I follow the 12 Imams. I'm from the Shia, Ithna Sharia, that means I follow the 12 Imams. The 10th Imam is al-Naqi, a guiding light for all to see, against the challenges on the deen. As a defender was always seen, Imam Hassan al-Askari lived a life in captivity, had the oppressors in such worries, in fear of the awaited Mahdi. Muhammad al-Mahdi is the 12th. We wait for him and pray for his help, hoping for the day to hear his call, as he brings back justice for all. These are the 12 of whom I adore. After the Prophet, they are my core. Blessings of Allah be on them all. and may He raise within my soul. I'm from the Shia, Ithna Sharia, that means I follow the 12 Imams. I'm from the Shia, Ithna Sharia, that means I follow the 12 Imams. I'm from the Shia, Ithna Sharia, that means I follow the 12 Imams. I'm from the Shia, Ithna Sharia, that means I follow the 12 Imams. Salawat.
MashaAllah, Muhammad, MashaAllah. For Muhammad's long life, please recite a long and loud salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. इल्म हिकमत का समंदर है मोहम्मद बाकर, इल्म हिकमत का समंदर है मोहम्मद बाकर, सूरत साकिए कौसर है मोहम्मद बाकर, वारिसे आये ततीर है मौला मेरे, बेबदल हादियो रहबर है मोहम्मद बाकर, खूबरू ऐसे के दुनिया को ज़ियाएं बाँटें, खूबरू ऐसे के दुनिया को ज़ियाएं बाँटें, नूर ही नूर है अनवर है मोहम्मद बाकर. पर मोहम्मद वाले मोहम्मद सलवात. For Urdu Qasida, I would like to invite Mehtab Haider to recite his Qasida. But Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad, Bulantar Salwa.
अस्सलामु अलैकुम. दो इमामों की विलादत का जश्न है. आपको सबसे पहले बहुत मुबारकबाद. एक सलवात पढ़ दें हज़रात. कुछ रुबाइयाँ हैं, जल्दी जल्दी पेश करता हूँ. अभी दोनों इमामों के हवाले से एक रुबाई के टाइम है. आगाज़ एक सलवात और पढ़ दें हज़रात. अल्लाहुम्मा सल्ली अला लश्कर नूर के वो फर्द जली आते हैं, लश्कर नूर के वो फर्द जली आते हैं, मुस्कुराओ के वली इब्ने वली आते हैं, लश्कर नूर के वो फर्द जली आते हैं, मुस्कुराओ के वली इब्ने वली आते हैं, हुर्मत दीने मोहम्मद की हिफाजत के लिए पाँचवें दसवें ज़माने में अली आते हैं, पाँचवें दसवें ज़माने में अली आते हैं. एक और भाई ये 10वें इमाम al-Naqi अलैहिस्सलाम के हवाले से एक सलवात पढ़ दे ज़रा. खुशी मनाओ के 10वें अली की आमद है, खुशी मनाओ के 10वें अली की आमद है, तकी के घर में इमाम नकी की आमद है, तकी के घर में इमाम नकी की आमद है, और इरादे मिट्टी में बातिल के मिलने वाले हैं, है जिसका दादा अली उस अली की आमद है जिसका दादा अली उस अली की आमद है. दसवें इमाम के हवाले से एक और रुबाई कि फर्श से तारिश ऐसा राबता देखा गया, फर्श से तारश ऐसा राबता देखा गया, सूरह कौसर का गोया सिलसिला देखा गया। फर्श से तारश ऐसा राबता देखा गया, सूरह कौसर का गोया सिलसिला देखा गया। और ले लिया बढ़कर तकी ने जब नकी को गोद में, इत्तिसाले नूर का फिर मोजज़ा देखा गया। एक सलवात पढ़ दे सर। पाँचवें इमाम मोहम्मद बाक़िर अलैहिस्सलाम के हवाले से दो रुबाइयाँ हैं, एक सलवात और पढ़ दे ज़ात पेश करते हैं। बंदगी में भी जो सरदार नजर आता है, बंदगी में भी जो सरदार नजर आता है, हूबहू अहमद मुख्तार नजर आता है। इल्म हिकमत के समंदर है मोहम्मद बाक़िर, इल्म हिकमत के समंदर है मोहम्मद बाक़िर। या अली आपका किरदार नजर आता है, हूबहू अहमद मुख्तार नजर आता है। एक सलवात और पढ़ दे। मतलए इमामत पर चांद पांचवा चमका। कुछ शेर है पांचवा के हवाले से कि मतलए इमामत पर चांद पांचवा चमका, हो गई ज़मीं रोशन और आसमां चमका, हो गई ज़मीं रोशन और आसमां चमका। और बाप आबिदो साजिद रूह बंदगी दादा, बाप आबिदो साजिद रूह बंदगी दादा। माँ की तरबियत का भी नक्श ज़ोफ़िशां चमका, माँ की तरबियत का भी नक्श ज़ोफ़िशां चमका। और ये शेर के कुन्नते अबू जाफ़र और लक़ब मिला बाक़िर, कुन्नते अबू जाफ़र और लक़ब मिला बाक़िर। इल्म इनका दुनिया में बन के कहकशां चमका, इल्म इनका दुनिया में बन के कहकशां चमका। और ये आखिरी शेर कि बाक़िर उलूम इनको इसलिए भी कहते हैं, बाक़िर उलूम इनको इसलिए भी कहते हैं। अरे इनके बाद दुनिया में जहल फिर कहाँ चमका, इनके बाद दुनिया में जहल फिर कहाँ चमका। नारे सलवात।
माशाल्लाह मेहता। बर मोहम्मद वाले मोहम्मद सलावा। अली है नाम तो सीरत में भी अली है नकी, अली है नाम तो सीरत में भी अली है नकी, जहां में आज शबीह नबी की आमद है, ज़माना पूछ रहा है ये किसकी आमद है, तो मैं ये बोला दोबारा अली की आमद है। बर मोहम्मद वाले मोहम्मद सलवा। I would request Brother Babar Ali to come and recite an Asheed in the favor of our Imams. Bar Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad Salawat.
एक बार दुरूद पढ़ दीजिए। एक बार दुरूद पढ़ दीजिए फिर। अली अली के सिवा क्या मेरी हयात में है, अली अली के सिवा क्या मेरी हयात में है, नमाज़े इश्क़े अली मेरे वाजिबात में है, बिछा सके जो मेरे चश्मे गम की तशनाल भी, ज़ख़ीरा आपका इतना कहाँ फिरात में है। दूर पढ़िए मोहम्मद वाले मोहम्मद। जिसकी ऐने हर में हक में विलादत हो जाए, जिसकी ऐने हर में हक में विलादत हो जाए, क्यों न वो किबलाए अरबाब इरादत हो जाए, उसकी खुद अपनी इबादत की अदा क्या होगी, जिसके चेहरे पे नजर करना इबादत हो जाए। एक रुबाई इमाम ज़माना अलैहिस्सलाम की। इन अंधेरों में वो सूरज भी नजर आ जाए, शर्त ये है कि दुआओं में असर आ जाए, बावजू रहती है हर वक्त हमारी आँखें, क्या खबर कब तेरे आने की खबर आ जाए। दुरूद पढ़ी मोहम्मद वाले मोहम्मद। एक बार फिर दुरूद पढ़ी। तौसीफ़े इमाम बाकर का किस शख्स के सीने में दम है। तौसीफ़े इमाम बाकर का किस शख्स के सीने में दम है। जो बात लिखो ना काफ़ी है, जो नक्श उभारो मध्यम है। हर वस्फ से उनके आती खुशबुए सिफ़ाते ज़ाते अली। हर वस्फ से उनके आती है खुशबुए सिफ़ाते ज़ाते अली। या ज़ाते अली में ये ज़म है, या ज़ाते अली में ज़म है। तौसीफ़े इमाम बाकर का। दूध पढ़िए मोहम्मद आले मोहम्मद। अश्कों को मेरे तौहीन न कर, क्या तुझको पता क्या तुझको खबर। अश्कों की मेरे तौहीन न कर, क्या तुझको पता क्या तुझको खबर। जो याद में उनकी बहते हैं वो अश्क नहीं है ज़मज़म है। जो बात लिखो ना काफ़ी है, जो नक्श उभारो मध्यम है। हो आपका जिस पे लुत्फ़ो करम, फिर उनके लिए शाहे उमम। हो आपका जिस पर लुत्फ़ो करम, फिर उनके लिए है शाहे उमम। क्या हिज़्न जो दुनिया नाला है, क्या गम जो ज़माना बरहम है। तौसीफ़े इमाम बाकर का किस शख्स के सीने में दम है। पहुँचा जो सलाम पैगंबर, जाबर के हवाले से उन पर पहुँचा है सलाम पैगंबर, जाबर के हवाले से उन पर। औसाफ़े इमाम बाकर में ये वस्फ बताओ क्या कम है। तौसीफ़े इमाम बाकर का जिसको इमाम है, जिसको इमामत का इरफान, इस बात पे रखते हैं ईमान। है जिसको इमामत का इरफान, इस बात पे रखते हैं ईमान, नाम इनका इलाजे दर्दे निहां, याद उनकी दिलों का मरहम है, तौसीफ़े इमाम बाकर का किस शख्स के सीने में दम है, जो बात लिखो ना काफी है, जो नक्श उभारो मध्यम है। दूध पढ़िए मोहम्मद आले मोहम्मद पर। एक बार फिर दूर पढ़ दीजिए। एक मनक़बत और पढ़ देते हैं, जश्न मौला का हम। एक बार दूर पढ़ दीजिए। हुआ जो इश्क़े सनाए अबू तुराब मुझे, हुआ जो इश्क़े सनाए अबू तुराब मुझे, खुदा ने कर दिया ज़र्रे से आफ़ताब मुझे, हुआ जो इश्क़। मीर ने इसका कलाम है। तहे ज़मीन नजर आए हैं बूतुराब मुझे, तहे ज़मीन नजर आए हैं बूतुराब मुझे, मिला है कब्र की ज़ुल्मत में आफ़ताब मुझे, मिला है कब्र की ज़ुल्मत में आफ़ताब मुझे, खुदा ने कर दिया। छलकते जाम रहे मैं कदा रहे आबाद, खुमे गदीर की देसा किया शराब मुझे, हुआ जो इश्क़। ये शेर कमाल लिखा है। नकाबुरुख से उलट दीजिए अली अकबर, नकाबुरुख से उलट दीजिए अली अकबर, चमक दिखा के जलाता है आफ़ताब मुझे, चमक दिखा के जलाता है आफ़ताब मुझे, ये कौले हुर था कि मैं दफ्तरे जिना में हूँ फर्द। ये कौले हुर था कि मैं दफ्तरे जिना में हूँ फर्द। किया है शाह ने लाखों में इंतखाब मुझे, हुआ जो इश्क़ सनाए अबू तुराब मुझे, खुदा ने कर दिया ज़र्रे से आफ़ताब मुझे, हुआ जो इश्क़। दुरूद पढ़ी मोहम्मद आले मोहम्मद।
माशाअल्लाह बाबर भाई की सेहत और सलामती के लिए बुलंद तर सलवा। Now I will request Honorable Hujjatul Islam wal Muslimin Sayyid Sulayman Hassan to come and address the Milad. Or Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad Salawat.
صلوات على محمد وآل محمد. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين بارئ الخلائق أجمعين، والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا أبي القاسم محمد. وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين، ولعنة الله على أعدائهم إلى قيام يوم الدين. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. أما بعد. Dear mu'mineen and mu'minat, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We have two, and in fact 3 occasions that we are commemorating today. 2 of them are days of celebration associated with Ahlul Bayt in particular, and they are the birth of our 5th Imam, Imam Muhammad ibn Ali al-Baqir alayhim as-salatu was-salam. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. And according to one narration, the birth of our 10th Imam, Imam Ali ibn Muhammad al-Naqi alayhim as-salatu was-salam. Salawat ala Muhammad. And the third occasion is also a very important reminder for our religious life, and that is the beginning of the month of Rajab. This night is the first eve or the beginning of the month of Rajab. And so I will begin by talking briefly about the significance and the importance of this month of Rajab and how it fits into our religious life. And inshallah, we will continue by talking about the life and the lessons that we learn from our 2 Imams, Imam Muhammad Baqir and Imam Ali Naqi alayhim as-salam. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. You are all familiar with the idea of a New Year's resolution. And maybe many of us, we make resolutions at the beginning of the new year, and it's already 2/3 of the way past the beginning of the month of January. By this time, many of us have made and already broken our resolutions. In Islam, we also have a similar kind of a concept, but the concept is different than simply to make a resolution and then hope that you are able to keep it for a few weeks or a few months or maybe just a few days. And this is that we have a focal point of our religious life, and that is the month of Ramadan. And then there is a build-up to that month of Ramadan. And this is the season of preparation. If you decide to run a marathon, you're not just going to wake up the day of the marathon and say, what should I wear to the race? But much before the actual event begins, you are going to make sure that you have your diet, you have your exercise regimen, you have your physical health, and your emotional readiness, all in line with the goal that you have, which is to be able to successfully complete and maybe even to compete and to win the race that you are going to enter. If you're somebody like me, you may need to start preparation well before the average person, because maybe you're starting from behind the median fitness of those who are entering into the race. So when it comes to our religious life, the month of Ramadan, I don't want to scare anybody, we're not going to be asked to fast tomorrow, but it's coming in just 2 months. And the preparation, the prayer for the month of Ramadan, that should be there throughout the year. In fact, on Eid al-Fitr, we pray to Allah that give me the opportunity to be present and to have the health and to have the readiness to once again fast and once again worship and once again move closer to Allah the next year when the month of Ramadan comes. So the prayer and the preparation that's there throughout the year. But the key preparation and the key focus on being ready for the month of Ramadan, that begins from this month of Rajab, which began tonight. And the first day of the month of Rajab will be tomorrow. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So what does that preparation look like? Well, one of the parts of that preparation is a hadith of our fifth Imam, whose birth we are celebrating today, Imam Muhammad Baqir alayhi salam. And this is a quotation of our beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi. لكل شيء ربيع وربيع القرآن شهر رمضان. Our fifth Imam says that everything, it has a time when it is at its peak, when it is at its prime, when it is thriving. There is a time in the life of every society when that society is young and confident and it is looking up to its future. And then there are cycles, maybe one generation later, you will find that that same society that seemed so thriving and flourishing is going through a different period in its life. And then the cycle may change once again. In our physical environment, there is spring, but then there is also winter. If you look at the world in the winter, you might think that the world is a very gloomy and desolate place. And if you look at the world in the spring, you might think that it is always going to be green and filled with flowers and new life, but neither of them is the full story. There is spring, and then there is summer. and there is fall, and that is followed by winter, and once again the cycle begins. So our Imam says, لِكُلِّ شَيْءٍ رَبِيعٍ. Whether it be a human being in our life cycle, whether it be our physical environment, whether it be a society in the story of a nation or a civilization, there are cycles, there are periods of flourishing, and there are periods of recession and cynicism. Everything has Rabi'a, a spring. And for the Quran and for the religious life of a Muslim, that spring is Shahru Ramadan, the month of Ramadan. Now, if you have ever engaged in agriculture, you know that a farmer may plant in the spring, but the success of their crop doesn't just depend on the spring. Farmers know what effect there is of precipitation in the fall and in the winter on the crop that they are expecting the next year. If it gets too cold, then there are certain trees, they may die. Orange trees, for example, they are going to thrive in a certain climate. If it gets too cold in the winter, doesn't matter how rich your soil is, how good the sun is, and how much precipitation they get in the spring, those trees may not be able to bear fruit. There are other places where a good crop requires a cold winter to prepare the ground, to make sure that there aren't too many pests, to make sure that the environment is able to bring the crop and the fruit. You plant in the spring, but whether that will be a successful planting or not is determined by what takes place before and not just during the spring. And the same thing is there for the Quran. The month of Ramadan will come, but then there are some of us who are going to be so unaffiliated and so distant from the Quran that we will not be able to read it in Arabic. And maybe even if we read it in English, because we haven't read it for a while, it will seem to be an unfamiliar text. And then there will be others of us who will have a continuous relationship with the Quran. They may not speak Arabic, but because they had a continuous relationship with the Quran, when they read it in Arabic, they will be familiar with the phrases and the words, and they may be able to understand what they are reading in the Quran without knowing the language fully, because of their familiarity and their constant reference. I read one verse in Arabic and I read the translation, and gradually I pick up the meaning of those verses of the Quran. There are other people, when they read one story in one surah, because they have a regular relationship with the Quran, they will think of the other parts of that story or that message that are found in other surahs. And so, the entire story of Prophet Musa, for example, will come before my eyes when I hear of it in one surah. The entire story of Prophet Ibrahim will come before my imagination when I read it in one surah. And that will only come if I have a regular connection and a relationship to the Quran. So our fifth Imam, Imam Muhammad Baqir alayhi salam, he says that you are going to plant the seed and you will begin to see the sprout. You will begin to see that initial growth of the Quran in the month of Ramadan. But this is the time when you are going to prepare the groundwork. You are going to make sure that the land in which you are planting that seed of the Quran is ready and it is fertile. And it's not going to kill the seed before it is able to germinate and sprout. And that is the first thing that we should be planning and preparing for in this month of Rajab is to reconnect with the Quran. For those of us who are able to read Arabic, even if we may not read it as fluently and as easily as we wish, then this is the time to practice our recitation. And these days there are so many resources. One of the easiest ways to give a greater fluency to our reading is to put on a recording of a surah, maybe a surah that we are familiar with, Surah Yasin, for example, or Surah Ar-Rahman, or any other surah that is not as unfamiliar to us. And ideally, it should be a slow and a precise recitation. And I listen, and then I also look at the text and follow along. So I correct maybe whatever weaknesses or deficiencies there may be in my fluency or in my pronunciation as I am reading along with that elegant and that professional qari. This is one way for those of us who may not have that fluency in reading the Quran to be able to connect to the Arabic text better. And we shouldn't be looking at the quantity of our recitation. Read it in Arabic, but then pause after every verse if you are able, and read the translation if you are not able to understand the original language. And don't just read the Arabic and read the translation, but pause and think. It is recommended, and it was the practice of Muhammad wa ali Muhammad alayhimus salatu wassalam, that when they would read the Quran, if there was any verse that spoke about punishment, then they would pause and they would think about the punishment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And they would do a dua after every verse that mentions hellfire, that, "Oh Allah, protect us from your wrath and from what we have earned of your punishment, because you are just and you are all-knowing and all-seeing." This isn't just a work of literature for me to read it and say, what a vivid description of punishment in hellfire. But rather, that is the reality of our life. And any one of us, if we were to think about how many times we were arrogant, how many times I thought that I was smarter than somebody else, I was better than somebody else, how many times I spoke dismissively or condescendingly to somebody else, then I will see that these verses that speak of punishment, they are not addressed to somebody else. It's not just to the Hitlers and to the tyrants of the world. I don't have that level of wealth and I don't have that level of power, so I never committed the crimes that those famous tyrants throughout human history have committed. But within my own limited life, I too have done many things that are unworthy. And so those verses that speak of punishment, they are addressing me. And they are reminding me. When I read the Quran and Allah mentions punishment, then I should think that it is addressing me before anyone else. And I need to ask Allah to protect me. And I need to seek refuge from His punishment. And then when there is a verse that speaks of the rewards of paradise, and that is part of the miracle and part of the beauty of the Quran, even though it was revealed piecemeal, gradually over 23 years, and even though it was revealed in different circumstances, in times of hardship, in times of war, in times of peace, but there is a relatedness and a connectedness and a balance in the verses of the Quran. So there is no overemphasis on God's justice, but there is a balance between mention of God's justice and God's mercy. So we have hope and we have fear in proper proportion and in balance. So we don't become complacent, but we also don't lose hope. Whenever there is mention of God's punishment, I should think about it. And whenever there is mention of God's mercy, I shouldn't say that, well, I am a follower of Ahlul Bayt, I have this in the bag. I'm going to paradise anyway, I don't need to worry about it. Nor should I say that I've committed so many sins that there's no hope for me. I'm just going to get my foot in the door at best. But heaven is for other people who lived better lives and were more generous and were more humble and were better than I am. No, that hope that Allah gives for paradise, it is for you and for me. Not because we've earned it with our actions, but because we have sought it and we have earned it on the basis of our love and our affiliation, our ideals and our faith, and not our actions are the source of our hope in God's forgiveness and His mercy. So whenever there is a verse that mentions God's mercy, then pause and think about it. Now, this is capital that you will build. In this month of Rajab, you are going to read gradually. If you're not a fluent reciter, then to improve your recitation, it may mean that one Surat Yasin is not going to take you 9 minutes, it's going to take you 20 minutes, or maybe half an hour, because you have to rewind and listen again, and then say it and improve. And then you're going to be looking at the translation, and then you're going to be contemplating. But over time, your fluency will increase. Once you have read one surah closely, the second time, even if you read it faster, your imagination will remember that the last time you recited the surah, you paused. And you thought about the story that is being mentioned and the message that is being given. Just like those of you who have been for ziyarah, or those of you who have been for umrah, or have been blessed to go for hajj. Right now, if I say to you, Yawm Arafah, then all of the commotion and all of the beauty and all of the prayers of the day of Arafah, does it come into your mind? You're not there. And you're not spending 8 hours in the heat or in the crowd of Arafah. But if you've experienced it, now you can bring it to your mind very quickly. The same thing as if you have been to Karbala at one of the special days of ziyarah or any other opportunity for ibadah. So in this month of Rajab, read the Quran slowly. Improve your fluency in Arabic. Improve your connection to the meaning of the text by reading the translation gradually. Improve your connection to the text by pausing and contemplating and praying to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That way, when the month of Ramadan comes, then all of that what you have done in the month of Rajab and all of what you have done in the month of Sha'ban will be present in your mind and in your imagination. And then you will be able to read maybe an entire juz or more than that in one day, but you will have the benefit of that concentration and that remembrance. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So I mentioned this in detail because it is important for us to appreciate how to approach the Quran so we can derive maximum benefit from the Quran, not just now, but a few months from now when the month of Ramadan comes. The remaining points I will mention very quickly. The month of Rajab is a perfect time to get into the habit of fasting. It's good for our physical body. These days, intermittent fasting is fashionable. And it's good for our emotional health, and it is most important of benefit for our spiritual well-being. And right now, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us the perfect circumstances because the days are getting longer, but they are still short. And so if I fast tomorrow on the 1st of Rajab, then that will be the easiest fast that I am going to do this year. Because then the subsequent fast will just be a minute or two longer. And that way it will build until the month of Ramadan. So the present season is actually one of the best ways to rebuild that habit for our body and for our mind of fasting. It's like warming up for exercises. Preparing for that marathon, you don't have to run 5K tomorrow. You can start with 1K and then gradually build it up And by the time the month of Ramadan comes, fasting will not be difficult. It will be easy. This month of Rajab, according to some narrations, our Prophet Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alayhi wa alihi, when he was not traveling and when he was not unable, he would fast the entire month. And then he would fast the entire month of Sha'ban. And then, of course, it is an obligation to fast the entire month of Ramadan. But you don't have to do all of that. Even a single day in the month of Rajab has a great deal of reward. So make a plan that I will try to fast some of the days of the month of Rajab. Tomorrow being the first day is a good day. The 27th of the month of Rajab is highly recommended because it is the day of Bi'thah, the day in which our Prophet was appointed as a messenger and a mercy for all of humanity. And if you can do some other days, the more the better. But there is no minimum. And of course, some of us, we may have missed days of fasting last year, so this is the time to make up whatever I have missed. I need to make it up before the month of Ramadan begins. So the first thing is reconnect with the Quran. The second thing is prepare my body and my heart and soul for fasting. And the third and final thing that I will mention is istighfar. There is a principle in Islamic ethical development, which is that you have to first cleanse yourself of impurities before you adorn yourself with what beautifies and what perfects you. Just like, for example, if I'm going to a fancy dinner, I'm not going to iron my clothes and put on my clothes and then go and trim my beard and dye my hair, because then I will maybe damage those expensive clothes that I want to wear to the event. So first I'll cleanse myself. First I'll groom myself. And then I'll take a shower and I'll put on the fancy clothes. So this month of Rajab is a time when you want to take a spiritual bath. Look at my shortcomings. Look at my weaknesses. Look at those relationships that I may not have given enough attention to. Maybe I have a relative that I haven't connected with. They called me a few times and I was busy and I didn't respond. Or we did see each other, but we got into a disagreement and we ended on bad terms. Whatever type of interpersonal relationships there may be, that I can do something to better them. Whatever type of obligation there might be between me and God that I have not given sufficient attention to. Look at that. See if there are amends that I need to make. See if there is an apology that I need to give. If it is a time of worship, do I need to do qada? Do I need to make up something that I have missed? This is the time to cleanse, to wash, to remove the stains. Not from my physical clothing, but from my spiritual clothing, from my person and my soul. So that when the month of Ramadan comes, and I want to pray, when the month of Ramadan comes, and I want to do dua, supplication, and salat, and recitation of Quran, then I can feel it in my soul, and not just say it with my lips. That feeling in the soul, it is tawfiq from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's not something that I can force upon myself. And it comes if my heart is clean, if my heart is sincere, and if it is pure. And that has to begin from right now. So in terms of preparation, connecting with the Quran, readying ourselves for fasting, and doing as much istighfar and repenting to Allah as we are able, so that we are ready, body and soul, for the spring of the Quran in the month of Ramadan. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Now, these were the teachings of our Imams, and in particular the hadith of our fifth Imam. But now let us say a few words about the two personalities whose birth we are commemorating today. Our fifth Imam is Imam Muhammad al-Baqi alayhi salam. And our 10th Imam is Imam Ali al-Naqi alayhi salam. Just a few nights ago, we had a majlis. We spoke in detail about the life, the teachings of Imam al-Naqi. So I will just say a few words. Imam al-Naqi, according to some narrations, was born on the 15th of Dhul Hijjah, which will be a few months from now. And according to other narrations, he was born on the 2nd or the 5th of Rajab. So it is according to this second narration that we celebrate the birth of our 10th Imam at the beginning of the month of Rajab. Although there are two different opinions, but in both cases, our 10th Imam was said to be born in the year 212 after the Hijrah of the Prophet, and he died in the year 254, just 6 years before the minor occultation of the Imam of our time, Imam Mahdi alayhi salam. So his life was 42 years approximately, of which he was the Imam for almost 34 years. The majority of his life was during his period of Imamat. And our 5th Imam, Imam Muhammad Baqir alayhi salam, he was born on the 1st of Rajab, according to the common narration, in the year 57 after Hijrah. Now, our 5th Imam, his imamat was for a period of 20 years, and our 10th Imam, his imamat was a period of 34 years. But because our 10th Imam became the Imam at the young age of 8, even though his imamat was longer than our 5th Imam, but his age was shorter. He died at the age of about 42. Our 5th Imam, he was the Imam for 20 years, but because he became the Imam at the age of 37, so his lifespan was longer, he lived for 57 years. Born in the year 57, and he lived for 57 years, died in the year 114 of the Hijrah. This is just a little bit of a biographical sketch, so we have a little bit of a greater familiarity with these two Imams. There is one contrast between the time of our 5th Imam and the time of our 10th Imam. Our 5th Imam lived at a time when many people, they didn't really know what the essence of the genuine teaching of Islam was. Many people, they loved Ahlul Bayt, but they didn't know who Ahlul Bayt were. And they didn't know what that love meant. And so the time of our 5th Imam was to establish a foundation of faith so people knew what was the actual meaning of Islam and what were the priorities of a believer. And if I say I love Ahlul Bayt, what does that mean? Is it just a label, a card that I can carry, put in my wallet? If somebody says, what kind of Muslim are you? I can say I'm this kind of a Muslim. Or does it have any practical implications on our life, our decision making, our faith? So that framework, that was established by our 5th Imam. And that is where he got his most well-known title from. His title is al-Baqi. And this title was given to our 5th Imam according to a narration by his great-grandfather, the Prophet of Allah, Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alayhi wa alihi. When he introduced his great-grandson, who was not yet born, to his well-known young companion at that time, Jabir ibn Abdullah al-Ansari, who survived for many years after the death of the Prophet, and by the time of our 5th Imam, he was an old man. He was also no longer able to see. He had lost his eyesight. But as an old man now, he came more than half a century after the death of the Prophet, and he conveyed the greetings of the Prophet to Imam Baqir. And he said that your great-grandfather, the Messenger of Allah, told me that you will be the one who will split open the seeds of knowledge so that people will understand the true teachings of Islam and they will understand what was implicit before. You might never imagine, if you look at an acorn, that if you were to see the result of that acorn 50 years later, that it could be such a mighty tree. The two, they don't resemble one another superficially, but the one, it comes from the other. And that is what Baqir means. يَبْقُرُ الْعُلُومَ بَقْرًا. He will split open the seeds of knowledge so the full meaning and effect of that knowledge will become visible. I'll just give one example. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. From the very beginning, Allah had emphasized and the Prophet had emphasized that you are to follow Ahlul Bayt unconditionally. So, ta'atullah, obedience to Allah, requires obedience to the Prophet. And obedience to the Prophet requires obedience to the Imam. This was there right from the beginning. But that first step was a difficult thing for many of the Muslims who were just new to Islam, and many of them had not yet fully cleansed their soul of the arrogance and the stubbornness that they had before they became Muslims. So even just to say, Ati'u Allah wa Ati'u Rasul wa ulil amri minkum was a very big ask. And people were reluctant. They gave their allegiance in Ghadir, but then very quickly they forgot it and they didn't live up to it. So it was not possible for people to understand more than Ati'u Allah wa Ati'u Rasul wa ulil amri minkum. But why can you obey somebody unconditionally? The teaching of Isma was not made explicitly in the time of the Prophet, not because it wasn't true. It was true. It was part of the teaching of the Quran and it was part of the teaching of the Prophet. That's what Ayatul Tathir is mentioning. But it was not made more explicit because people were still trying to figure out the first step. And I can't teach calculus to somebody who is still trying to learn basic arithmetic. I can't teach an advanced college textbook to somebody who is still stumbling at the first steps of elementary school. So, when people are having a hard time with ta'ah, then if I say that this is the rank of imams, this is the true divine favor that has been showed to the imams, then people might reject the entire message altogether. Many people, they were not ready. But implicit within unconditional obedience is the fact that the person you are obeying is not going to make a mistake. Because if they were liable to make a mistake, then Allah would have to say, obey them when they are not making a mistake. Allah cannot say, obey this person, and then lead you to a person who is not worthy of obedience in all circumstances. So now, bringing out that implicit teaching and explaining to people that if we have been ordered to follow Ahlul Bayt unquestioningly, then it is because they will always be able to give you the right answer and lead you to the true Islam. And you don't need to doubt or second guess because they are ma'asum and they are protected from error. This was the process that was begun by our fifth Imam, Imam Muhammad Baqir alayhi salam, and completed by our sixth Imam, Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq alayhi salatu wassalam. This process begun by our fifth Imam, this is what allowed people to understand that what is implicit in the teachings of the Prophet, what is implicit within the verses of the Quran, what is the essence of that teaching that maybe people were not ready to listen and understand earlier, what is that true reality. And so our fifth Imam, he established a foundation for the identity of those who follow Ahlul Bayt. And in the time of our 10th Imam, those rituals and that identity was firmly established. But then there is a problem that comes when you have a strong identity as well. It doesn't mean the task is done. Because once we have a firm identity, then it sometimes becomes human nature to undermine the purpose of those rituals and just look at the surface. Let me give you one example. There is a struggle in society for us to establish a value system of modesty. Sometimes we don't really control what we look at. Even without thinking about it, if we see something immodest, we don't realize that we are supposed to look down and avert our eyes. So we don't see, we don't hear, we don't engage with something that is contrary to modesty. And Islam has given rules of modesty. What to wear for men, for women, how to act in a situation where other people may not be speaking or dressing or acting in accordance with Islamic modesty. So this is the foundation. And it is important for us to have that foundation legally in terms of fiqh and morally in terms of akhlaq. So that's the first step. That's the teaching and the task which was largely performed by our fifth Imam. And then after him, our sixth Imam, to establish what are the rules of Islamic dress, what are the rules of Islamic prayer, what are the rules of Islamic practice, what are the moral teachings of Islam. But now let's say that we have a society where everybody knows the rules of hijab. Everyone knows the rules of salat. Does that mean that we're done? Is it possible for a person to wear hijab but to be less modest than somebody who doesn't wear hijab? Absolutely. Is it possible for somebody to pray and to be arrogant and think that I am superior to somebody who does not pray? The purpose of hijab was not to make me feel superior to somebody who doesn't wear it. The purpose of prayer was not to make me feel like I am closer to God than somebody who does not pray. It is a baseline to make me humble and to give me the tools to move closer to God. But it's human nature. Sometimes we look at the surface and we think that that's all that's needed. And if we have that superficial practice, then we're good. I pray, I fast, I do my obligations, I've taught my children how to pray and how to read Quran, we're safe. So the task of our 10th Imam was to take a Shia society that had learned the teachings of Imam Baqir and Imam Sadiq and that had a strong Shia identity, but to prevent them from exaggerating or being negligent, having the rituals but not understanding the significance and the reason for those rituals. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. And if I want to honor these two Imams, then I have to do both things. I have to be familiar with my Islamic teachings and obligations and practice. What are the laws of Islam? What are the requirements of Islamic practice? I can't just say that, well, all that matters is I have a good heart. No, have a good heart, but make sure you also understand that if there is a way to come close to God, then it is what is taught by the Prophet and what is taught by Ahlul Bayt. Know how to do your Islamic obligations properly. Know what are the ethical teachings of Ahlul Bayt. What are the laws of Islam? What are the beliefs of Islam? That is the foundation. But then when you have the foundation, make sure that you don't just keep the surface and the rituals. Don't let the Quran distract you from sincerity. Don't let reading the Quran or reading a dua distract you from the fact that the purpose of the text is to bring you closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not to become an end in and of itself. There's some people who recite Quran beautifully. But then if you ask them, what does it mean? I don't know. How much of it have you tried to implement in your life? Well, I haven't done any of that. Quran for me is just an art. Whether it be the recitation or whether it be the calligraphy. And that is the challenge of our 10th Imam, to take people who have the rituals and they have the outward expression of faith and make sure they understand the meaning. In conclusion, I would like to share one hadith of our 5th Imam, Imam Muhammad al-Baqi alayhi salam. A reminder for myself and for all of us of the teachings of Ahlul Bayt. The Imam says, Ma ahsan al-hasanat ba'da al-sayyi'at, wa ma aqbah al-sayyi'at ba'da al-hasanat. How beautiful is it for a person to do something that is sinful or unworthy, but then to follow it up with something that is good. Ma ahsan al-hasanat ba'da al-sayyi'at. If I inadvertently or ignorantly do something that I shouldn't do, then how worthy is it and how good is it for me to follow it up with something that is a hasana and that is pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because innal hasanat yudhibna sayyi'at. If I have done things that are sinful, then doing good deeds, they cover up and they clean up the harm of those sins. So the Imam says this is beauty. But then the flip side of it is also equally true. وَمَا أَقْبَحَ السَّيِّئَاتِ بَعْدَ الْحَسَنَاتِ. And how evil it is and how ugly it is for me to do good and then to follow it up with something that is evil. And it is human nature that when we do something good, we often think that, I've done my good deed for the day. I've earned the right to eat unhealthy because yesterday I exercised. I've earned the right to be mean to somebody because yesterday I did a good deed, I gave charity. I've earned the right to be stingy because yesterday I was generous. We rest on our laurels. We make one good decision and then we give ourselves the agency and the excuse to do something evil. There are numerous psychological studies that have borne this out, that if you want to predict whether somebody is going to make a good choice or not make a good choice, sometimes take a look at their previous choice. And if they've made a good choice in the past, they're less likely to be generous and to be forgiving in the future. Well, that is exactly the opposite of the ideal that we have in Islam. Our Imam says that when you have done something wrong, immediately try to turn it around. Because your hasanat will clean and compensate for your sayyi'at. Now, human nature is also that if I do one bad thing, I will say that, well, it's too late for me, so I give myself an excuse to keep doing bad things. Our 5th Imam says, no, turn it around. Do hasanat. If you do hasanat, gradually your soul will become more ready to do what is good, and it'll become easier to avoid what is evil. Ma ahsana al-hasanati ba'da sayyi'at. And if you do something good, then don't say, all right, my quota is filled. Now I have an excuse just to ignore God's commandments and do whatever I want. وَمَا أَقْبَحَ السَّيِّئَاتِ بَعْدَ الْحَسَنَاتِ. If you have done something good, then consider that to be a new baseline, a new foundation to do even better. Don't say that I've done the good that I need to do, and now I can go and just have fun without regard to the teachings of Allah. You can have fun, but do so within the commandments, within the guidelines given to us by Islam. Once again, this is the beginning of the month of Rajab, and I pray to Allah to grant me and all of us present and all mu'mineen and mu'minat the opportunity to worship, to seek forgiveness, to pray to Allah, and to come closer to God and His Book and His Prophet and Ahlul Bayt. It is the day of the birth of our 5th Imam, and according to one narration, our 10th Imam. May Allah count us among their true followers. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to understand the foundations of our faith and to fully understand the meaning of the teachings that we have been given, to value the rituals, but also to understand the purpose of those rituals and not just to see the surface. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect and purify and keep us in His guidance and in His grace. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
متوجه زيارت.
السلام عليك يا رسول الله. السلام على علي أمير المؤمنين. السلام على فاطمة الزهراء. السلام على الحسن والحسين. السلام على علي بن الحسين زين العابدين. السلام على محمد بن علي الباقر. السلام على جعفر بن محمد الصادق. السلام على موسى بن جعفر الكاظم. السلام على علي بن موسى الرضا. السلام على محمد بن علي الجواد. السلام على علي بن محمد الهادي. السلام على الحسن بن علي الزكي العسكري. السلام على الحجة بن الحسن القائم المهدي صلوات الله عليهم أجمعين.
telling the story that part of it was in English, part of it was in English. And then he said, what's English? And I said, it's Spelunky. It was broken. Like, we could look at everything else, yeah?
Yeah, just let an agenda out there, like, this is what we're going to do today. I'm done with school. We're talking about the guy that got up and left. Right? I did my time. I'm done. You guys are short.
Also, I mean, is this like an abnormal crowd? Because it was like 80% English speakers.
I said, me, I'm not that interested in anything.
Small older population. Maybe they call people over.
So before you guys continue, so I don't like you guys sent an email out for the whole month of January while we're doing because Rajab and Shaban is busy. Sundays. We missed out on the last program because we were doing Sundays.
So that was an exception, yeah. Generally,
Here's some food for thought, right? And I bought this up in the fashion. You're not my dad, that's why. You're like my dad. Your dad. He's walking right past you. The reason they asked me was because there was this guy named and I was like, oh, am I gonna watch this? It wasn't announced as much. It was announced as a show. Your wife actually texted us just a few minutes before we left the house that it's all of a sudden we're going. So something got lost in communication somewhere.
Maybe that's why. I don't know why there wasn't much more than
मैंने मैसेज कर दिया मैं आपको मैं दोबारा
But yeah, I felt like what we did wrong, just looking at the agenda, because I've been in his position once or twice. Like, we should have announced the agenda.
नंबर है मैंने आपका नंबर फॉरवर्ड कर दिया
It usually is now, except for programs that are designated. So I'll just go for that before we write everything down. And I talked to Flash and Hubby about this as well. If you're struggling with a majors program on a Sunday or wherever, you can start your program so we'll do the crowd, we'll do that, right? But you can set up on Sundays because like some of us want Sunday school, you get home at 2 just resting for an hour, and it beats you up. Friday's better. We typically do programs for now. Suggestion. Because like right now we're struggling with sponsors and weekends as well. So if we mix it up together, kind of we mix two stuff and birds together. You know what I'm saying? Because we really didn't want to miss the last program. It was kind of upsetting, to be honest with you. So yeah, we just been trusted.
We don't have enough to cover up every time. So we'll do.
Okay. All right, thanks.
Either you're dumb or you're smart. It's so dumb, right? They used to tell us that. And then so I just took I read in one college